I believe our measure provides for 6 new ideas, Mr. President, on taxing mining companies. Is that correct, Mr. President? Number one, let me just enumerate what are the 6 that we found out. Number one, a cap on allowable interest deduction based on quarterly debt to equity ratio of 2:1. Number two, margin-based royalty on gross output of mining operations outside mineral reservations. Number three, windfall profit tax on net income. Number four, ring fencing. Number five, automatic release of the LGU shares. And number six, royalties to IP communities of not more than 2% of gross output.
Yes, that is correct.
Did I miss anything of significance, Mr. President, in our bill?
Mr. President, I believe that's all except for yung provisions on transparency and accountability, probably, also.
And can the sponsor tell us more about the provisions on transparency and accountability? What would be included in these provisions?
Favor of confidentiality.
Mr. President, under the provision of transparency and accountability, institutionalization of transparency and accountability in the extractive industries through a government system for the public disclosure of the general information sheet and scrutiny of revenue data along with social environmental expenditures. Also, disclosure of the general information sheet and other reportorial requirements submitted to the SEC. Provision. That's all, Mr. President.
Who will scrutinize the financial statements to be submitted by the mining companies?
Yes, in this measure, Mr. President, BIR. In the current regime, it's just the MGB. Pero ngayon po, sinama na po natin. It's now the BIR.
Was there a problem with the current system where it is the MGB, Mr. President? May problema ba? Is MGB not fulfilling its responsibility?
Tsaka BIR naman dyan. Now, Mr. President, with the proposed measure, Your Honor, Mr. President, the company has to publicize tax payments that will be confirmed or be validated by the BIR, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Sige po. Can we talk about number 5 first, which is the automatic release of LGU shares? May we know more about this, Mr. President?
Ano daw, 6 months tayo, no? Currently, naabot ng 2.
Ito ang point niya.
Andiyan na ba yun? Nasa na?
Gusto po.
Ano bang sinulat mo sa tabi? Ito na yung banda.
Yung LGU shares. Dito sa ano? Sa listahan.
Page 15 tapos.
Yan na?
Release by who? By
Saan?
By who?
Ito ba? Mr. President, at present, although the LGUs have shares, no, in the mining operations, but the problem is, in reality, it takes about 2 to 3 years sometimes before they can get their share. So, nangyayari po, they come up with ordinances, no? They try to be innovative dahil nga po 3 years pa bago nila makuha, no? Ano nga ba yung mga sample? Mga environment fee, ano na? Soil depletion tax, howling fees, and among others. So, ang yun po nangyayari. That's why now, with this measure, there will be a minimum within the period of 6 months from the excise payment of excise tax on mineral products, royalties, and such other taxes, kailangan po ma-remit na po sa LGU yung kanilang share so that we will be avoiding yung mga creation of different ordinances, no, yung mga fees that I mentioned earlier, Your Honor. So 6 months po ang time frame for the LGUs to get their share from the present 2 to 3 years, Your Honor.
Kaya nga, just by law, we just say na just by enacting this law, we will now realize this suddenly things are efficient, Mr. President. Ganun. Are we changing the entity which will now release the amount to the LGUs, or it's the same entity? And what entity is this, Mr. President?
DBM nag-release.
At present. At present, Your Honor, Mr. President, it's the DDWM that releases the share of the LGUs.
So at the okay.
But now, according to our Assistant Secretary from DOF, that they will be issuing guidelines so as to fast track the immediate release of the LGU shares.
No, is the law the obstacle? Or it's the lack of the guidelines which is the reason? So guidelines will cure everything, Mr. President?
So dito, para sinabi rin natin within 6 months.
Dati wala.
So,
There's an existing guideline. There are existing guidelines, Your Honor, Mr. President, but wala hong prescribed time, walang period. So now we are specifying under this measure that it should be released within 6 months, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Kunyari, wala itong law. If there's a will, is there a way? Kaya rin nilang gawin yun sa guidelines. Lagyan nila ng 6 months.
According to our DOF Assistant Secretary, that they are already doing it right now.
all the consultation.
They are presently doing consultations to have these new guidelines, Your Honor, Mr. President, to shorten the period of release, no, within 6 months.
So itong provision na ito, with the salient feature of automatic release of LGU shares, walang nagbabago as to the government entity which releases the amount, that is the DBM. It's the DBM now, it will be the DBM after under this law, under this bill. Ganon din, ano? Walang magbabago. Ang recipient, LGU, ganon din LGU, except that meron na tayong mandate that the DBM should now release the LGU shares within 6 months. From what? 6 months from what?
From payment, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Payment of the mining companies.
And from the payment of mining companies and every quarter for the excise and other and royalties, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Okay, yung every quarter, is that a new feature or nangyayari na rin yan today?
For excise taxes, Your Honor, it's existing already. For royalty, Your Honor, Mr. President, it's the MGB or the Mines and Geosciences Bureau that collects the royalty fees, Your Honor, at present.
Okay, collects at present. So is that going to change under the bill? Who collects?
Your Honor, Mr. President, it will now be the BIR, which will be collecting the royalties as well.
Okay. So by the mere fact of the change in the entity, government entity collecting the royalty, we believe that we will now be able to expedite the process.
There are other things. So doon sa guidelines, meron kami specification.
Ganun ba yun?
MGB pala ngayon. Because of certification of PIR. Existing. So may mga specification kami doon. But don't say how many years.
Saan? Sa DOF.
Kasi started with PIR of education of collection. And then PTR is project.
Oo nga, but see, ano yung detalye na?
Actually, kukuha.
Ano yung detalye?
So, Your Honor, Mr. President, it starts with the BIR, the issuance of the certification of total collections, and then it will be